say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you here today. I know there'll be a sizable number of people in this room who will be aware that Martin Corey is interned in the Galway jail, and indeed I've seen a few faces here sitting protests and people who have made political comment in the past, and it's been very gratefully received by Martin and the committee in general. I'm the chairperson of the Release Martin Corey Committee. It was formed in April 2010, shortly after Martin was taken from his home and interned in the Galway jail. Really what I want to speak about here today is the legal situation around Martin's case. You know, he is a political prisoner. The very nature of him being detained is political. But I think it's more important that people understand the legal scenario and how it's actually very confusing, and Martin isn't really sure what's going on, and how Martin Corey's human rights is being breached by his continued detention. So to talk about Martin, we'll need to really go into a wee bit of background about who is Martin Corey, why is he in jail. Martin Corey is a veteran Republican. He joined the Republican movement when he was a young man. In 1973, he took part in an operation, a Republican operation against 3 RUC officers who were killed in an ambush, and Martin was subsequently jailed for his part in that ambush. He spent 19 years in jail, and in 1992 he was released. And Martin was released because he had a life. When you're a life prisoner, you know, you're never just let off scot-free. You get out on a life licence. It's not something that you have to particularly sign or agree to, but you get out. Martin's release was in 1992, and that was 6 years before the Good Friday or Belfast Agreement. And the reason that I bring that up is that a lot of people are confused, and indeed the media have actually reported that Martin was let out of jail under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. And it's very important that people understand that he wasn't, so he isn't subject to the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. When he was released in 1992, I know there's people in this room that personally know Martin, and I'm sure they could testify that, you know, he got out of jail, he tried to create a life for himself. Remember, Martin was 19 years of age when he went into jail. He was still a very young man, didn't know an awful lot, came out and he was trying to build his life up again. Had a small business going in Lurgan, fitted very well in with the community, but I suppose the only thing that Martin didn't change is that he remained a Republican and remained a member of the Republican movement. Just one day, randomly, I know it might sound ridiculous, but randomly he answered a knock on the door. Stood in front of him was the RUC, who told him they were taking him into custody. They took him into custody. Martin was a bit shell-shocked, as I'm sure you're aware, but as a Republican, he was well aware that these knocks come on the door. The 5 o'clock knock, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced it. He was taken to the local, he was actually taken to Antrim, and he inquired, why am I here? And the RUC, I don't know whether arrogantly is the word, said, we don't know. We don't know. We've been told to take you into custody. We're still trying to find out the reasons why you've been taken into custody. Now, I'm sure anybody would be aware, if the RUC, PSNI, whatever you want to call them, call to your door, take you from your home and keep you in custody, they should damn well have a good reason for it. So a phone call came to the station, and confirmation was given from the British Secretary of State's office, Sean Woodward at the time, that he had revoked Martin's licence. Based on the fact, at that time they said, on closed information, and that this closed information meant that Martin presented a security risk to the state. Martin was taken to McGabry jail, and a special advocate was appointed. Now, a special advocate, this is the first time that I ever came across this, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of people in here are dealing with different legal cases at the moment. A special advocate is someone who is appointed to hear the closed evidence basically on your behalf. But this person doesn't have the right to actually is excluded from discussing it with you, your legal team. So you're relying on someone that you know nothing about to fight your corner, and this person is actually appointed by the state who has got you detained. So, you know, common logic would say this is absolutely wrong, because the very people who are keeping you detained are the people that's appointing this person that's supposed to be fighting your corner. It's very confusing, I know, but that is the way it stands at the moment. Martin's being held under the direction of the Life Licence Parole Commissioners. Once a year he is entitled to have a parole hearing. He's been in 3 years now in April, and he's had 1 hearing. So they're breaking, I don't know what the word is, legislation or statute or whatever. I'm sure the legal heads here will be able to inform me more about the terminology. But in 17 months he hasn't had a parole hearing. A lot of people here will be aware that Martin was granted release by a judge in July of last year, and I'll just go into a wee bit of that. Just actually before I do that, there was a parole hearing held in March and then again in May 2011. During this, during the proceedings, there was a witness from the security forces who gave evidence against Martin, who had been keeping him under surveillance. Part of this surveillance formed the reason why Martin's licence was initially revoked. So bear with me here, it's a bit choppy. This man gave evidence during the parole hearing, and the story that he gave to justify Martin's licence being revoked was completely different to the witness testimony he gave during the parole hearing when Martin was looking to be released. So that just goes to show you that there's absolutely no accountability here. The security forces, in my opinion, of course, you know, that is only opinion, because we're not allowed to see anything. I don't get to see the evidence, so I can only give an opinion based on assumptions. This was a totally fabricated story that they made up about Martin. Maybe there was a grain of truth in certain scenarios, but it was certainly exaggerated. And when it was put to them, when this person from the security forces was asked certain questions, they didn't have anything to stack it up. But even after that, Martin was refused release. So his legal team started the proceedings of taking it to a judicial review, and the judicial review took place in April and May of 2012, just a year past. The case was presided over by Justice Seamus Tracy, who himself, and I'll just read this, during the proceedings he expressed his difficulty presiding over a case in which most of the alleged information wasn't even made available to him to make his judgment. So he was making his judgment based on stuff that he couldn't even see. He took 7 weeks after hearing everything to make a judgment on whether Martin should be released or not, and he concluded that Martin Corey's continued incarceration was a direct breach against his human rights. And when he made that judgment, he gave Martin unconditional bail and ordered that Martin Corey would be released on the 9th of July 2012. So Martin wasn't actually present during these proceedings. Word got through to the jail, he'd been granted bail, he was taken from the cell, he got his belongings, and I must add, he got a lot of letters that were sent in to him over the year that he didn't actually receive, so they were reporting personal letters from him. And while he waited in the reception or the waiting area of the prison, and his family were in the car park waiting to pick him up, a phone call came through from the British Secretary of State, who basically said that the judge that day didn't have the relevant authority to release Martin, and that he was authorising his continued detention. Heartbreaking, and on a personal level very upsetting. Following this, there was a public outcry from human rights activists, Republicans, and various other people who would just be interested in civil liberties for everybody. And Martin's legal team put in an immediate appeal against this decision. A couple of days later, it was heard in the High Court, and this was heard by the Lord Chief Justice, who, through the jigs and the reels, and I'm not going to bore you by going into the details, rubber stamped the British Secretary of State's decision and said that this judge, Seamus Tracy, didn't have the relevant authority to release Martin. And one thing that I will point out is that the day that Seamus Tracy had made the judgment to release Martin Corey, he was actually jetting off on holidays that night. And they waited until Seamus Tracy got out of the country and then overruled his decision, because they couldn't have actually done it if he was still in the country, because he would have been the judge hearing it the next day, because it would have been appealed to him. So the timing was fantastic for them. It is basic internment, and anybody who has met even opponents of republicanism have found it very hard to call it anything other than internment. He is in jail at this moment with no charge, no trial, and no real accusation made against him, or the fact that he has a political opinion. So this is, in its very rawest form, a political prisoner. He is in there solely for his political opinion. His brother died in last year, and just like Marion Price recently, Martin was refused compassionate parole to attend his brother's funeral, as Marion initially was refused parole to attend her sister Dolores' funeral. At the last minute, Martin was granted it, as was Marion, who was allowed out for a number of hours. Martin was allowed out for 2 hours, accompanied by 2 British ministers, who basically escorted him, and in my opinion took on the job of the jailer. So that's where we are today. Martin Corey is in jail. I would like someone to tell me why he's in jail. Martin would like someone to tell him why he's in jail. When you keep someone in jail and you have no allegation to make against them, that person does not have the recourse to defend themselves, and that to me is basic internment. One major thing is that Martin is due a parole commissioner's hearing every year, and he hasn't had one in 17 months. Now, just in the recent days past, there's been an English prisoner who is in a similar scenario. He's a life prisoner. His licence hasn't been revoked. He's in serving a sentence. He's due to get it every year. He could want 1 month over the 12 months, took it to the court, and was granted his review. The judge said this was a total breach of his rights. So Martin Corey starting next month, it'll be 18 months. So he'll be 6 months over getting what he's entitled to. His legal team are in the process of taking it to the Supreme Court in London. If that fails, they'll be taking it to Europe. But while this goes on, a 63-year-old man who's already spent 20 years of his life in jail remains in prison with no charge. So it's very important that people are aware of this, and really just stand up and say this is wrong, because I make note of what Patricia said earlier. They're going to come from the trade unionists. We all need to stand up for people regardless of human rights. Is such a sacred thing, and if we don't respect the human rights of others, we can't expect people to respect our human rights. So that's really it in a nutshell, and it's an interesting legal case, and I'm sure the legal heads will have a bit more to say on it maybe.
Thank you.